5. This is from SAT number 11. This is another paired question that we have to do. It's a pretty good paired question. I'd say it's pretty challenging. Actually, I put on like maybe a 4 or 5 level difficulty because it's a question that requires a little bit of back and forth. Okay? So for the most part, I like to solve things in a linear way, meaning on a paired question, we're going to go from this question to this text to this question, done. But sometimes we're not able to do that. We have to do a little bit of back and forth, right? And sort of chip away at the problem step by step until we can end up at a solution. So that's what we're going to do here. There's more than one way to solve it, but I think this is the most efficient way. Let's check it out. So this says, the author of passage 1 suggests that an advantage of the method Lewis's team used to grow microorganisms is that it. So what we're going to do is look through the answer choices for 45, and we're going to look for something that could be an advantage of the method Lewis's team used to grow microorganisms. So let's start with lines 17 through 21, which say here, but only about 1% of these organisms, this is referring to microbial substances that have been the root of antibiotic drug development. Only about 1% of these organisms can be grown in the lab. The rest, in staggering numbers, remain uncultured and of limited use in medical science until now. When I first look at this, it doesn't strike me as being that strong of an answer choice. Basically, it's saying that only one of these organisms could be grown in a lab. The rest were unable to, but it doesn't tell us directly what the method Lewis's team did. But because it is sort of talking about maybe an advantage, right, because they're able to do something now, right, they didn't do before, I think we should keep it as an answer choice. And we can look back later as we go on. The next one would be 28 through 32, which says, to do this, the team designed a gadget that just sandwiches a soil sample between two membranes, each perforated with pores that allow molecules like nutrients to diffuse through, but don't allow the passage of cells. This, to me, on first glance, seems like a strong answer choice. It's telling us an advantage, a specific advantage of the method, and the method would involve this gadget that they designed. And it's given an advantage over maybe other experiments or help them to figure this out. So I think this is a good answer choice. We should keep it. Now we're at 32 through 34, which starts here. We just use it to trick the bacteria into thinking that they're in their natural environment, Lewis said. This is a quote by Lewis, and it is referencing what's happening before, which in that case, because the first one is a little more explicit than the second part, probably I would favor the first part over the second part. But I wouldn't eliminate this second quote either, because it's in this element that they're tricking the bacteria into thinking that they're in their natural environment. So maybe if we had an answer choice that says something like, the advantage they have is making bacteria think that they're in their native environment, then this would be a better option. So let's keep it, even if the don't think so strong off the bat. So far we're making 0 progress. This is great. Then we get to 44 to 47, which says it's likely that teixobactin isn't effective because of the way hepatitis disease. We can even start to stop here. What this is telling us is an advantage, not of Lewis's method, not an advantage of the method of Lewis's team, but sort of like the advantage of teixobactin, right? Like why it's effective. So for this reason, we're already outside of the purview of their design and their experiment. So we can get rid of this extra D because it's only about teixobactin. It's not really about an advantage of Lewis's team. So that's going to leave us with these three. So what we do now is let's just back and sort of make a quick mental note of what each of these talk about, so that when we go back to 44, we have something in our mind. So 17 through 21 tells us that basically the advantage that Lewis's team had is that they were able to culture bacteria that has previously remained uncultured. The next one basically says that they designed this gadget that allowed nutrients to pass but not cells. And the last one was that they tricked their bacteria into thinking they're in the natural environment. Those are the 3 possible advantages. So we're going to go back and see if any of our answer choices from 44 match those. So A says, identifies the requirements for soil bacteria to thrive and replicates those features in artificial soil. This seems to match our strongest text, which is here. Right? That they identified the requirements for soil bacteria to thrive, and then they try to replicate those features. I think this would be a good answer choice. Right? This could actually match either this one or this one. B says they enable soil bacteria to take in more nutrients than they typically consume in natural settings. And this one might seem to refer to this bit here, where they designed this gadget that allows nutrients to pass in. The issue with it, however, is that it's saying that it allows them to take more nutrients. And all this says is um, it basically allows them to think that they're in their natural environment, which would tell us that they're only getting about the same amount of resources, nothing about getting more nutrients. For that reason, we can get rid of this option. He says that they directly affect the cell walls of bacteria rather than the proteins those bacteria produce. This would probably match this text on here that we already eliminated, which is telling us that it is not the protein, but the cell walls, the structures. But we already eliminated that because it's not an advantage of Lewis's team or the method of Lewis's team, but an advantage of teixobactin itself. So if we can get rid of that, D says allow the research to make use of soil bacteria that they had previously been unable to exploit. This is true because this tells us up here that it would allow them to make use of things that previously, right, they were unable to exploit, remained uncultured until now. So this one is a possibility as well. So now we're kind of stuck. We have to decide between A, which would match, right, either B or C, or D, which would match A. And there's a couple things I would point out. So one is that this is a lot more general. You're going to have a hard time. It's an advantage of it because it's general. You have a hard time trying to find something that's wrong with it, right? An advantage is that they allowed researchers to make use of soil bacteria that they previously were unable to exploit. There's really no element in them that's wrong. If you look at A, however, everything looks right, but there's a couple ways you can think about it. Is it really the case that they're creating artificial soil, right? And maybe they're creating these sort of semi-artificial environments, but if we look back on this line, which is one thing that makes this question confusing is that we have to reference text that's outside of our actual text. But that's the nature of this question. To be honest, I actually don't think it's that great of a question. I think there's a few duds on this test, which I usually don't argue, but I think this question is not that great. But nevertheless, if we look back, we see that here, natural environment, right? Basically, instead of trying to create this artificial, right? Instead of trying to figure out the ideal conditions for each and every one of the millions of organisms, we simply grow them in their natural environment. So in this case, it's not artificial soil that they're trying to replicate the features in. It's just the natural soil that they're using these gadgets to sort of modify. For that reason, we can get rid of A and choose answer choice D, question 44, and answer choice A, question 45.